you want to, let's start. Let's do a little
let's
bit
do it.
so everybody can get a feel for this.
Sure. Who in here has read the book?
Oh,
wow.
Okay.
Told you, Chapel Hill.
Yeah. You led the book tour so far.
Seriously. So one of the reasons that Catherine and I decided to do readings at some of the events is because the book is so new. So those of you that have not read it, please don't feel bad, right? Like it literally just came out. And we really wanted an opportunity for anyone who came to one of these events to get a flavor for the story and what we're trying to do. And so I am going to start with chapter 1. For those of you who don't know, this is a dual narrative, as in a two-person narrative, not a dual narrative. Although I feel like that a little bit. And so I write in the voice of DeAndrea, who is the Black protagonist in this story. And we are going to start with her. So if you have your books, literally starting on page 1. And we're not going to read the entire chapters. We're just going to read a little snippet from some to give you guys a feel for the book. So y'all ready?
Ready.
Okay. Chapter 1, DeAndrea. Is my mic on? Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Even though DeAndrea Whitman was woefully behind schedule, she continued rearranging the fragrant long-stem lilies she'd purchased for the first summer soiree she didn't want to host. From the black linen place cards resting on elegant mini easels to the gold-rimmed china, everything DeAndrea envisioned for her and Malik's farewell friends gathering was perfect. Well, everything was perfect except having to say farewell. She still couldn't believe they were leaving Atlanta in 3 weeks. How was that all the time they had left? Only 3 more weeks in the black oasis of Buckhead before they moved to the whiter-than-white suburb of Rolling Hills, before Malik had to transfer to his consulting firm's Northern Virginia office, where he'd be the only black executive, and to accept that their 5-year-old daughter, Nina, wouldn't be a kindergartner at a Montessori school of black excellence. Now their sweet girl had to attend Magnolia Country Day School, some not as progressive as it thought it was private school, that paled in comparison, literally and figuratively. And what kind of name for a town was Rolling Hills? Like hills don't even roll. Only 3 more weeks of being black and bougie with my besties, DeAndrea wailed. Then I'll be living among the whites and be stuck dealing with Karens and Beckys and all their caucasity. Me, DeAndrea.
Okay,
Catherine?
I'll go.
Yeah, you go.
All right.
Let's meet our other protagonist.
This is Rebecca. I wrote the Rebecca chapters. Rebecca is white. And I'll tell you a little more about her after we read. Okay, so this is chapter 2. This is page 19. Rebecca Myland loved vacations. Scratch that. She loved planning vacations. Once she was on them, however, she didn't quite know what to do with herself. Even now, with all the elements present for a picture-perfect late summer escape, a vivid blue sky with not a single cloud, a light northeast breeze keeping the temperature just right, and a luxury rental home with a heated saltwater pool that could entertain her kids when she didn't feel like making the schlep to the beach. If only she could figure out how to sit still. Her family didn't have the same problem, of course. Why would they? She had everything covered. Her husband, Todd, was currently still sleeping in. His brother, Jack, and wife, Tina, probably were too. Child-free and carefree, they could do whatever they wanted. But Rebecca had been watching her daughters play in the pool since practically the crack of dawn. At what age would they start sleeping in? Not that it mattered. Rebecca couldn't stay in bed past 6 a.m. anyway. Having finished arranging the to-do list categories in her latest organization app, Don't Let Me Forget, Rebecca side-eyed the book on the small table next to her lounger. She felt like the cover was judging her. Woke yet? Wake up. Understanding the history of race and racism. She hadn't cracked it open, which she felt bad about, but every time she'd get ready to pick it up, the girls would summon her with another, watch how many mermaid twists I can do, or do a boomerang of us jumping in. She would read the book on this trip, though, or at least start it. She'd already emailed the other moms, encouraging them to finish it before school started in a few weeks. Our first book club meeting of the year will be upon us before we know it, ladies. She knew she needed to take her own advice. But first, a little bit of Instagram.
I told Catherine, I said, she said, you know, you can ask questions or have your reactions. I said, oh no, welcome to Chapel Hill. I will be facilitating other people who have reactions to these two selections. So friends, hands up. Let's go for it. They're here. We get them only tonight. So ask your questions or your reactions to this. And let's be conscious of time and don't take too much and let other people talk too. Okay? You all know that though.
Do you feel like you got a little bit of a flavor for DeAndrea? You want me to give you a little more?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to chapter 3. So I'm on page 33 now. This reading is going to be a little bit lengthier. I think you'll enjoy it. It's for good reason. Okay. As DeAndrea approached the entrance to the preserve at Rolling Hills subdivision, she reached for the security remote clipped to her truck sun visor. When she pressed the red button to open the residence gate, her Apple Watch vibrated softly against her David Yurman bracelets. $8.50, she screamed at the notification. How was she going to make it to therapy in 10 minutes? Shit. I mean, shittles. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel as the wrought iron gates opened in slow motion. Come on, she pleaded, continuing to inch her custom bronze Range Rover forward until there was just enough space to safely pass through. But instead of peeling off, which was what she wanted to do, DeAndrea began the excruciating 5 miles per hour journey toward home. That slow-ass opening gate and the slower-than-slow community traffic restriction were just 2 of many on her laundry list of things she hated about Rolling Hills. God, it's so hard out here, she groaned. Fix it, Jesus! Tempted as always, DeAndrea refused to drive above the ridiculous speed limit. Not even 1 extra mile per hour, even on days like today, when there were no other cars on the oak tree canopied streets, even though she didn't see anyone walking or pushing one of those expensive made for Instagram, not really for jogging strollers, because someone might be watching. No, someone was definitely watching, and she didn't want to give anyone a reason to complain about the preserve's newest Black homeowners. The preserve's only Black homeowners, she reminded herself. During last night's Sacred Sunday Zoom chat with her girlfriends, all hell broke loose as soon as Tony asked the same question she'd been asking for the past several weeks. Had they seen any Black folks yet? At least she'd stop asking if they met any other Black folks yet. And when DeAndrea said they hadn't, her friends were convinced there weren't any other Black people in their subdivision, and perhaps in all of Rolling Hills. Nah, it's Black folks out here. We saw a few when we were checking out the neighborhood, DeAndrea recalled. She and Malik had also been checking to see whether any houses were proudly displaying a Confederate flag or those little Sambo-looking lawn jockey figurines she hated so much. Oh, and there was that Black family we saw at that weird-looking strip mall town center place, she said. Their daughter was the cutest. I'll never forget because she was around Nina's age. She was so brown and chocolate and yummy with her little braided pigtails. DeAndrea had only recently let go of her pipe dream of the 2 girls meeting and becoming besties. And for some reason, sharing that remembrance made Simone go off the rails. Listen, white folks who have enough money to stage their entire house just to sell it, ma'am, you know damn well they got enough extra coins to stage the neighborhood too. Think about what you just said, Dee. Simone squinted as she leaned in closer to her computer's camera. A random Black family just happens to be roaming around a strip mall with a little girl who just happens to be around the same age as Nina. On the same day, y'all just happen to be in town looking for a house. And y'all ain't seen them Negroes since. That don't sound staged to you. They weren't randomly roaming, DeAndrea felt herself get defensive. They were shopping, Simone. They had bags. You know what was in all those bags? All the money they got paid to pretend like they lived in Rolling Hills. Simone laughed. Come on, Dee Dee. It's been 2 months since y'all moved. 64 days to be exact. You would have seen them again by now. Tony took a sip of wine. I mean, it does sound a little suspect and cray-cray. Negroes for hire. Simone shook her head shamefully. That's what's wrong with the world. People will do anything for money. Right, and all skin folk ain't kinfolk, Tony said. But black folks getting paid just to hang out in white neighborhoods so that other unsuspecting black folks feel comfortable buying property? That's a new level of love. Just putting their own brothers and sisters in harm's way. Simone continued her sermon. Because you buy the house thinking, okay, it ain't gonna be that bad out here. At least I got a black neighbor or two. Then next thing you know, bam! You find out you're the only black family, and now y'all starring in Get Out Part 2. LL barked violently in agreement. That's the only thing that makes sense, right, Bunny Boo, sweet boy? Those Negroes for hire set our friends up, didn't they? Simone picked up LL and held his furry face up to the camera while she continued her baby talk. Tell Auntie Dee Dee, say, get out. On cue, LL barked twice, which made the friends cackle. DeAndrea knew Simone and Tony were just joking. But what if they were right? What if Negroes for hire was a real thing? Because where were the other black folks? Now y'all really know DeAndrea.
Let's get another portion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, for those who read, and you know this already, but for those who will read soon, you'll find that Rebecca she is trying really hard, or she's a try-hard, as my girls refer to her. The book starts 3 years post a George Floyd-like event. So, like many other people at the time who hadn't been thinking about structural racism at a deeper level, Rebecca is one of those, and that might sound familiar to some people here if you were paying attention, which I know you were because you're here tonight. And she did all the things. She got all the books that she was supposed to get, and she took pictures of the books that she was supposed to get and did not read the books. And she started a parent diversity committee at her school, and she's just trying to be the best ally who ever did ally. And so here we are at the first day of school. She's helping her daughters get ready, and we'll start there. Oh yes, thank you. Page 62, if you'd like to follow along. Okay, all right. Mommy, Isabella shouted, pointing toward the TV. You said no screens while we're eating. Rebecca looked over and realized Good Morning Today was still on. Once the girls had come back downstairs, it had become mere background noise and she'd stopped listening. Had she missed the school lunches segment? Oh, you're right, sorry. Daddy and I were just trying to get the weather forecast. Honey, where did I put the remote? Another day, another viral video, the TV blared. In cell phone footage posted to Twitter early this morning, a white woman walking her dog in a suburb outside of Denver can be seen yelling at a black woman in her car stopped at a stop sign. Here's a clip. And a note to viewers, this video contains racialized language. Click. Yeesh, couldn't turn that off fast enough. Rebecca shook her head at the TV. How can people still act like that? It's absolutely shameful. She tossed the remote onto the sofa and returned to the kitchen table to continue brushing Lila's hair. What's shameful? Isabella asked. Todd, with his mouth full, replied quickly, don't worry about it, it's nothing. Neither of them wanted the news to dampen the morning, but Rebecca had read enough parenting blogs to know she shouldn't dismiss her girls' inquiries altogether. Well, it wasn't nothing, but we don't need to worry about it right now. She put the brush down and ran her fingers through Lila's detangled hair. All done. She walked over to the microwave to warm up her coffee. Lila gathered her hair and pulled it all to one side in front of her shoulder and said to Isabella, they were talking about a white woman being racist against a black woman, Izzy. This caught Rebecca off guard. She assumed the girls hadn't really paid attention to the details. What's being racist? Isabella asked before taking a sip of her juice. Todd got up from the table and fumbled, grabbing his plate of pancakes. Who wants another one? His attempt to change the subject had so little finesse, Rebecca felt like he was delivering a punchline in a hokey family sitcom. Lila, however, took him up on his offer and handed him her plate. "It's when you don't like people because of the color of their skin," Lila said, repeating verbatim what Rebecca had explained to her over the years. "Why would anyone be like that?" Isabella asked, her brow furrowed and head tilted. "Because they're idiots," her big sister answered through a bite of her pancake. "Lila, we don't use that word, and don't talk with your mouth full," Rebecca scolded, then reconsidered. Although I guess in this case, maybe idiot is the right word to use. "Why were they being idiots?" Isabella asked. "I don't know, stop asking me all these questions." Rebecca drew in a deep breath. "Normalize the conversation. Don't make race a taboo topic. Isn't that what all the experts say?" She just wished she didn't have to answer all these questions right now, especially since she wasn't certain what the answers were. Grabbing her coffee mug from the microwave, Rebecca sat down at the table across from her daughters. She took a sip to give herself a few more seconds to find the right words, or as right as she could get. "The reason the white woman was being racist is she probably lives in a neighborhood that doesn't have many black people in it. And so she saw this woman driving and thought she didn't belong. This kind of thing happens with people who don't value racial diversity." "What's racial diversity?" asked Isabella. "Having lots of people with all different skin colors," Lila answered before Rebecca could. "But racial diversity isn't important here," she added. Rebecca almost spit out her coffee. "Yes, it is, honey. Racial diversity is very important here." Rebecca tilted her head in her husband's direction, saying to him with her eyes, "Want to help me out?" His response was another shrug of his shoulders and sip of his own coffee, as if to say, "You've got this one, babe." Why did the hard stuff always have to fall on her, on all moms? It infuriated Rebecca. But at the same time, she knew she didn't really trust her husband to handle it responsibly anyway. Todd never read anything, not about parenting or about race. And he certainly never read anything about parenting and race. Of course, she could have pushed him to educate himself, and they could have talked about how they, together, would approach these conversations with their children, but that sounded like even more work than taking care of it all herself. "Why don't we know any black people then?" Lila countered. "We do know black people." Rebecca started to count with her fingers. "There's Sean at the front gate. There's his backup, Todd, you know, the guard from over there at the preserve who fills in for Sean. James." Todd finally said something helpful. "Right, there's Sean and James. And there's a new black family joining your school. Remember, Isabella? Nina is going to be in your class. You met her at orientation." Thank God for the Whitmans. "Oh yeah, Nina, we're going to be friends." Rebecca beamed at Isabella. Always good-natured and welcoming, Izzy would be a great friend to Nina, like she naturally was to all kids. She wouldn't mess things up like Rebecca had when she was a kid. "But we don't actually know them yet," Lila said. She cocked her head and looked satisfied, like she was winning an argument. Lately, she was always trying to win arguments with everyone. "Why are they called black?" Isabella said. "Nina's skin is brown, so is Sean's." Rebecca believed these were all good questions, truly, but she hadn't planned on taking a deep dive into the topic of race on the first day of school.
See ya.
He told us he had to go.
Yeah. So, it wasn't the book. It's not the book. So, Barb, we love to share the alternating chapters in that way, just so you all get a feel. One of the things that was so important for Catherine and I when writing this book is we wanted to show how folks are living in the same place, having two very different experiences because of their identities, essentially, right? And I'm trying not to give too much away. I'm being mindful of my words. And I think this next part, and then we'd love to open it up for questions. Oh, you're going to read a little bit more, right? We're going to read a little bit more. But this next part in chapter 5 is in direct response to what we just saw in Catherine's chapter, which Becky is at, you know, in the kitchen with her girls, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this thing is on the TV, turn it off." And we're going to show you how DeAndrea responds. All right? And this is much shorter than my last read.
Page?
I am on page 68. 68. Malik sat motionless in the driver's seat of his black Escalade, his large hands clutching the steering wheel, even though he hadn't turned the car on yet. In his navy pinstripe suit and crisp white button-down, he looked like a businessman at the starting line of the Daytona 500, Consultant Edition. DeAndrea reclined her seat and leaned back into the buttery soft leather with an exasperated sigh. Their heads turned to face each other, their expressions conveying both shock and sympathy as they sat in the school's parking lot. Just like that, their baby girl was officially a kindergartner. You all right, Dee? Malik pressed the ignition button. Then he placed his right hand on her thigh and squeezed twice to offer a bit of encouragement. Nope, not all right. She buckled her seatbelt as Malik began reversing, and the dark safety straps tightened across her shoulder and tummy. Damn, even the car knew she needed a hug. It's okay to cry, you know. Malik waved thank you to the driver waiting patiently for him to back out of his parking spot. Nothing wrong with shedding a few thug tears. Hell, I might even shed a few myself on the way to the office. She gave a dry chuckle, and it sounded as forced as it felt. Honestly, I'm surprised I'm not bawling. Guess I'm still in denial? Babe, how is Nina in kindergarten? I have no... Whoa! Malik slammed on the brakes. The tall blonde woman who darted out didn't even look in his direction. She smiled as she continued running toward her mom friends, seemingly oblivious that she'd narrowly avoided being hit. A short redhead woman opened her arms wide, and the tall blonde woman fell into her embrace as a brunette rushed over to join them in a group hug. They were all wearing variations of basic white girl high-end athleisure, not Heidi's Free People ensemble. These women weren't emo fairy cool enough for that. DeAndrea kissed her teeth as Malik drove by the friend trio. It's giving stop sign Karen energy. Yo, stop sign Karen was wildin'. Malik's booming laugh was contagious, and DeAndrea couldn't help but join in. She was really doing the most. DeAndrea shook her head as she snickered. And for no reason at all. And the internet, that song, right? Malik cleared his throat before he started singing. Oh, you were gonna hit us. You were gonna hit us. You look like a black lady who doesn't like to stop. DeAndrea sang along with Malik as they both erupted in laughter. When DeAndrea had woken up and seen hashtag stop sign Karen trending, she braced herself for the worst. But it was actually the type of social media shenanigans that DeAndrea and Malik were always down for watching. White people caught on camera, white peopling. And so one of the reasons we wanted to share that, Barb, is because oftentimes, and it's not to say that these hashtag moments aren't harmful, right? And this is very different from police brutality. So I just want to make that distinction. But Black folks, part of our survival has been laughter, right? So we would have that moment where we're like, dang, I can't even stop at a stop sign, you know, without there being an issue. And then historically, laughter has been a part of our survival. We are going to make a song out of what was being said. We're going to find reasons to laugh, right? And I think it's very important for readers to see and understand that juxtaposition and where that's coming from. And you'll see a lot of that throughout the book.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the chapters for those of you who've already read and know. No spoiler alerts if possible, okay? But if you have any questions or you have some thoughts about what you've read or what you just heard, let's open it up. Ask questions.
Yes.
Right here.
Well, I'm Andrea, and I have been here a year, so I very much see myself in the Andrea. I'm from Memphis. It's very, very Black.
Yes.
But at the same time, everywhere I went, I was used to seeing Black people, like regardless of what the economic situation, what neighborhood it was, like we in there, Black people in there. It didn't matter what restaurant, where the restaurant was, we're there. And here it has been very shocking to go places and not see anyone that looks like me. And I've been here a year, and like very much like Becky, I don't know any black people. I don't. We just so happened to move to Apex because that's just where we had an Airbnb and we moved here. I don't know anything, not familiar with the area. And also, like Becky, the neighborhood that we're in, there's one other black family in the neighborhood, which I never see. I don't know. Like, they were outside. It's very weird. But maybe they were paid. I don't know. I don't see them. I got questions. But it's like, it's Middle Eastern community. And I'm very much like Becky in that, like, I'm researching and like, okay, well, how do I, approach this culture? It's very different because there's prayer at certain times of the day. So like children are not outside. So like my kids don't have like, well, where are the kids? And like in the summertime, I think a lot of the community they go back home and like the neighborhood is empty. It has been very much a learning experience.
Yeah.
We've experienced where there's been like different festivals and things and holidays that they're celebrating and like wanting to ask questions or like, oh babe, like we're like peeping after like, oh, that looks so cool, like what kind of food is that? And wanting to ask questions, but like, oh, I don't want to like be offensive. So it is just, the book is just really on time because I see a lot of myself in both the characters and, used to living in a duality, being a person of color anyway, but like this is a triality or something. Like, what is the next? Because I just like navigating, okay, not seeing any black people, and now I'm like, really, I'm looking for, I'll take some white people. It has just been an experience.
It's really tough. It really can be tough, and I think, that was one thing that we really wanted to share, in this book. By the way, Negroes for Hire, conversation I had with one of my dear friends who moved to an area in Potomac, Maryland, and very much was, looking for property, and they went through the neighborhood, and they're looking at this neighborhood and that neighborhood. And then that one neighborhood, they saw this little black family walk. They were like, we gonna move right here. And they've never seen them again. It's a very common narrative. And so there is, and here's the thing, there probably are black families in these neighborhoods, right? But it's so common that these things occur, that this is how these, narratives come up. I love that you see yourself in both DeAndrea and Becky's characters, because that is what we want for readers.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing all of that about your experience. It does point to me like how much we did see that Rebecca and DeAndrea even we find they have a lot of commonalities as well. Someone last week even brought up, I had been talking about how Rebecca first only sees Rebecca as a black woman, like who could fulfill the need that she has to feel good about the diversity in her life. And so she's really dehumanizing her and objectifying her in that way, rather than being like a good community member and saying, oh, here's a new person in our community and she might be lonely, she might miss her friends, she's going through something, and misses that opportunity to connect. And then someone actually in the group of people at the bookstore said, Rebecca sounds lonely too, and that's true as well, and she's missing out on a connection because she's not seeing DeAndrea as like just a full person.
Whole person.
Yeah. Thanks.
But I would like the opportunity to say, welcome to North Carolina.
All your new friends.
And that's right. And our Durham folks, we have Durham folks here like, well, yeah, we're going to exchange phone numbers.
This is the most diverse group that I've been in since I've been here. Well, when I walked in, I was like,
welcome. I will say Durham probably has a more racial diversity of full-time residents. When we have the students here in Chapel Hill, we have a lot more, or probably competitive, but I don't think that's fair in terms of like people who have made this is their full-time permanent community.
Love Durham for sure, and I wish that I had you know, when you move a place,
Of course.
you don't get the whole story, and you just don't know until you get here, and you know.
Well, we want
stereotypes
you.
and things, but
So-
we're in Durham a lot, so
You can come to Hillsborough. I'll
See?
welcome you.
Hillsborough.
You can come visit me.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
Did anyone else see? Oh, yeah, we had another
Audrey,
question.
you had a question.
Yes, I am interested in your process. I have two questions related to process, the writing process. The first one had to do with the names. So how did you select the names? I can assume that Rebecca comes from Becky, which we all have an understanding of who or what a Becky is. But was that the origin of the name, and where did you get the name DeAndrea? And then my second question, so I'm gonna ask all my questions and then shut up. My second question is, here you read DeAndrea's section and then you read Rebecca's, and then going back and forth is really interesting, and I can see a distinction in the writing. So I'm curious as to how, as I said at the table, I want to know how the two of you managed to write this particular book together, and how you came up with the voices for the book.
I'll talk about DeAndrea. So what is interesting is DeAndrea's character is not only pulled from my lived experiences, but also that of my friends, my community, my village, right? My middle name is Andrea. Much like DeAndrea, I am also a reformed lawyer. We know we share the Negroes for Hire experience. You know, a lot of her friends, a lot of the things that they say and do are based on real conversations that I've had with my friends. We wanted to make these characters as authentic as possible. And so to do that, you know, we did have to sort of pull on these real experiences. And one thing that I love is the publisher really trusted us to be honest with the language, to be honest with the relationships that these characters have when they are with their friends and then when they are out in public. Black folks, we know this is code switching sometimes with our language, but it also goes, our mannerisms, right? There are things that we're saying under our breath as we approach the place that we're going that we know is going to be predominantly white. And they allowed us to share that in the book so that everyone is aware of the dynamics of what it means to have an identity and how it doesn't leave you, right? It doesn't matter what we are sharing and portraying from day to day. It doesn't leave me. I'm always cognizant that I'm a Black woman, and I always have to be mindful of how I show up in the spaces that I'm in. And so that is one of the things that we share. I'll let Catherine talk about Becky and why we have, you're right, there's a caricature of Becky. And then we'll answer your second question about process.
We thought Christine had invited me to do this project with her, and we had been, you know, just in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and just, it was so heavy, of course, and we saw a lot of this performance happening, and of people wanting to show that they were doing the right thing, and show that they were learning, and show that they were, you know, traumatized by white people, right? The performance of allyship from white people. And so we thought, you know, could we add something new to this conversation with bringing a little bit of levity to it, and bringing in some satire about what this discussion had become at that time. And we thought it might be funny to think, you know, what would it be like to have a character named Rebecca who doesn't want to be a Becky, you know? And, you know, like on many things that happened in the book, actually, that we wrote, we thought we were being a little bit absurd and outlandish, and then like this thing would happen in the news, you know? And I didn't know that many people at the time who were preferring to not go by Becky or Karen anymore. But then after we started writing, we saw that this was happening all around us.
Articles online.
Yes, yeah. So that's sort of where we went with the name, and then ultimately, I mean, yeah, no one wants to be a Becky. We don't want to be a Karen. I really hope Catherine doesn't become the name someday. I'll change my name. But more importantly, we really want to say, like, whether your name is Rebecca or Karen or Becky or anything, how are we acting? How are we showing up? What are we doing to interrupt racism and do better? So that is sort of what we wanted to explore with all of that, with the names.
And the process.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
This is
Yes.
interesting.
And for those of you who don't know, Catherine and I are friends in real life. Okay? It's very surprising for folks. And we actually met. I was working as the managing director at the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center at American University. And we were having the first National Anti-Racist Book Festival. And Catherine and Andre screened I'm Not Racist, Am I?
Andre Lee. He was a
Yes.
producer for I'm Not Racist, Am I? And a filmmaker in his own right, too.
Yes. And so Catherine and Andre come to the center and we're talking and we're like, hey, it's a cool ass white girl. We going, hey girl, we gonna hang out.
I wish my kids could hear you say that.
I know. And so that's how our friendship began. And, you know, when I was thinking about this project and had a conversation with my agent at the time, you know, I was really struggling with how I would write it. And she said, is there anyone that you would want to write it with? And I was like, actually, right? And I think it's very important, and I've shared this at every book talk that I've had with Catherine, and that is that I didn't just pick a white person to write this book with. And I have other white friends, not my only white friend. But Catherine is someone who I have valued her work from the film to Point Made Learning workshops. Like we had an opportunity to really work together, like on the ground doing this work. And so I knew that she was a true ally. Not that she had deemed herself an ally, but the communities in which she serves, the work that she does, we had deemed her an ally. And I knew that that would be very important for this book. So I share that before I share part of the process, because a big part of co-authoring is trust, right? And that is, before we're about to talk about race and racism, like this is like heightened trust that is needed now, right? How are we telling the story that we want to tell? Knowing how I feel about African American history and culture and how I want to weave that into everything. We had a conversation about that with one of the chapters in the book, and that was something that I really had to trust her on, right? I'm a historian by trade. I'm going to find a way to get it in there. And I had a very horrific scene that was Catherine's suggestion, the editor's suggestion, right? Like, but I really struggled with that because I wanted to keep it in here, and it boiled down to trust, right? The editor couldn't convince me, but Catherine was able to convince me and tell me why, right? And we were able to talk through that. So even though we were writing in alternating chapters, we very much relied on each other to really bounce ideas off of, to really make sure we were moving the story along in an apt way. Because there are things that, I mean, put anything in a book, but is it moving the story along? So I would go in my corner and write my respective chapters. Catherine would go in her corner and write her respective chapters, and then we would come together and read, just like we did with you all today.
And sometimes we'd be like, wait, that's not what you said.
That's not what you had in the outline.
You just changed the story.
In the outline, you said.
Yeah. So then we had to like do the outline again.
Yeah.
And write the chapters again. So there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a really fun process, and we did a dual narrative in a way that a lot of people don't do dual narratives, which we found out for good reason. You know, it's usually they're never in the same place. And we're like, we're going to have them in the same place. We're going to do something different. And we were like, oh, we got them in the same place. This is hard. But it ended up being exactly what we needed and wanted this book to be.
And the outline in terms of, you know, in story, we call, you know, beating it out. So you have your beats, this happens, then that happens, this is the place. So you built the outline together,
Yes.
and then when you say you went into your respective corners, you were writing DeAndrea's experience about the things that were going to happen according to the story beats that you had.
That's a very good point.
Right.
So for those of you who don't know, when we're talking about the outline, it's a chapter outline. So imagine every chapter in this book being a part of an outline, and we may just have like 3 or 4 sentences, 3 or 4 bullets. Like, DeAndrea's gonna go here, she's gonna say this, and then that's gonna happen at the end, right? But everything in between there, those were just the plot points to move the story along. So that's why Catherine was saying, you didn't say that. You know, like that's why that would happen, because characters and stories also take on a life of their own.
Was that ever constricting for you when you did come back and said, wait, what, that's not what you said you were gonna do? Because as an artist, you're writing, and those characters do pull you into new paths, and they do open up new ideas.
I think that's a great question for Catherine, because she's a journalist at heart. So she was already struggling with making up stuff. So
It's true. I was like, I mean, a novel? Like, make stuff up? I like to tell other people's true stories. So, yeah, I mean, one thing that came up was that, like Rebecca, I had in my head that they were just going to be instant best friends. And then as the book, as it all like unfolded in our minds, that was not realistic. That's not what happened. I mean, those of you who have read, you know sort of how that plays. It's a little more complicated than that, as things are. But that was one part too, where I'm like, well, why aren't they hanging out right now? Why aren't they talking to each other? And so we had to negotiate that in times when we'd come together.
Good, Audrey?
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Susan?
So does that mean then that when you started the book, you did not know how it was going to end?
we thought, first of all, we thought we knew everything. Okay? Let's just start there. So this book was actually, it's called Sold on Spec, which is very rare for a novel. We also learned why. So generally nonfiction books, you can submit an outline to the publisher and it'll, hey, this is what this book is going to be about. Here are some sample chapters. And you go ahead and they're like, yes, we will buy it. This will be great. And you write the book. Novels are rarely sold on spec, largely because of what we just discussed with our outline. Things keep changing, right? And so because this book was sold on spec, we submitted what we thought would be the chapter outline at the time. And so at that time, yeah, we thought we knew how it was going to end. We had them doing yoga together by chapter 3. We thought we knew what we were doing, and we did not. And so, and that happens a lot, by the way, just with the writing process in general, for anyone in here who loves to write. But yeah, we thought that outline was it, didn't we?
Yeah.
That first
Just plug it in, keep it moving.
You had a question here, and then Janice.
Okay. First of all, nice to meet you guys. When the book came out, I think I saw it on social media or what have you. I'm a book nerd at heart, but I saw it on social media and I read the blurb and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to get this book or what have you. And so then I stalked you guys and I was like, okay, let me look at that tour schedule. Y'all was from the West Coast last week, wasn't
we
it?
were.
So I saw that you guys were going to be in Chapel Hill. I was like, okay, let me go ahead and, purchase the book, all that good stuff. So I'm so glad that I got to meet you guys in person. But I wanted to ask you guys, it's always nice to see like co-authoring when it's a dual authoring of a book or what have you. But I want to find out 2 questions and I'll kind of make them quick. The first one is like, what inspired this story? I'm Rebecca, not Becky. And then the other one is for you guys, what came first? Was it these amazing characters or was it the plots?
All right, those are good. You want to start?
Sure, thanks for following us.
Yes.
She's been yes, thank you.
You're going to find the author.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, you know, Christine had mentioned this, and we've been circling around this a little bit, but we've been doing a lot of anti-racism education for a long time. I mean, I would say got started in earnest when I was working for Barb on like my very first documentary, which was on her film Adopted, about transracial adoption. And that's when I started to like enter in more of the thinking about structural racism, things like that. So that's about 18 years ago now at this point. And we've been doing, you know, workshops and these conversations and everything. And then sort of found ourselves in doing like corporate diversity, equity, inclusion, which now has become this whole thing.
Actually, it's no thing at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Had a window.
Yeah.
It had a season.
Yeah. It was really popular.
And we talked about that too. I mean, like, this is part of it.
Yeah, and so but I think for me, what was so exciting about doing this, even though I was thinking like, for a while after we were in the corporate DEI space for a little bit, I was like, I want to do an expose on this whole thing. Or like just blow it up, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much just hypocrisy and money being spent in ways that shouldn't be, and people thinking that you do a 1 hour training and then, oh, racism's gone. And just, all of it was just making me bananas, right?
It was a time.
Yeah. And so this, what the invitation to work on this was like, oh, now we can make it go however we want, and to have some satire, point out the absurdity. And it was, I mean, almost a catharsis for me to be able to put a lot of that in here, to say like, this is the stuff that's happening, it's absurd. Rebecca is saying, I mean, she gets a sign for her neighborhood that says all are welcome here, and it's a gated community, right? She's so wealthy. So just think about that. And while that may seem very distant from many of us here, it is not that far from where we are. Like, if we really can start to connect with that and think like, okay, where am I actually not really acting the way that I'm saying I'm acting, like doing what I say I'm going to do. And I think it gives a little bit of distance with the wealth that they have in the book and the way that we're poking fun at it. And we do that not to poke fun at the issue, because there are actually amazing DEI practitioners out there, people who are doing amazing work in academic institutions and out in the world in corporate America as well, and in, you know, activists and everything. There's so much great work being done that's been done. It's going to continue, even though DEI in that way isn't there anymore, or it's going away. But we wanted to be able to have fun with this a little bit, and to be able to laugh at ourselves in the way that we get caught up and start to miss the mark. And Rebecca, you see, she's all in her head. She's trying to do all the right things, but that leaves no mental capacity for her to actually have any self-reflection and do something more meaningful with her energy and her resources. And so we wanted to just like wrangle with all that.
Yeah. So it's definitely the plot first. And I think probably like maybe 4 to 6 months in, we were like, I probably need to get to know DeAndrea a little bit more, right? And we started to do these character profiles. I know, Barb, you actually were very instrumental early on, like just making sure that the characters were likable and believable and authentic, right? Because there is some satire in there. We are pulling from, you know, lived experiences. There are things that we wanted to show and tell. Sometimes it can come across as being too perfect or too preachy or teachy. One example is DeAndrea and her husband Malik. It was very important for me to show a strong nuclear Black family. Yeah, I went so hard, so hard in the first few drafts, right? To the point where there was one time I read a section which I thought was beautiful. Someone knows the story. I thought it was beautiful, and I'm like, so what'd you think? You know, and you get to know your co-author a little bit. And Catherine doesn't really have a poker face. And there wasn't this normal like, oh my God, that was so good, that was so funny. You know, so I was like, what'd you think? She was like, Malik's a little perfect, isn't he? And I was like, yeah, you know, yes, her husband is doing all the things. He is cooking, he is cleaning, he is taking care of the kids. I mean, you know, and so there is a tendency to almost over course correct when you are trying to really show aspects, at least in terms of like race and identity, and I think gender would be another. Like there's a tendency to over course correct to say like, I'm going to show you, this is not going to be a trope. This is gonna be realistic, right? And so we had to get to know our characters better in order to really do that. And I do think that was after the plot. We were definitely, because we knew the plot. We were living the plot. And like Catherine said, although we see DEI is going away, it is very important for us to understand that this work has been going on since 1619, okay? There have always been people who have called out injustice and inequity. We have seen this work change many, many times. I remember when I majored in Black Studies and everyone was like, what are you gonna do with that? What you gonna do with that, right? And I was like, I don't know, actually, right? But I was so fascinated with African and African-American history and culture. And no one could have told me that 20 years later, I would have been able to write my own ticket, because all of a sudden there was this interest in Black lives, right? We have seen this work change names so many times. We are unmoved, right? As far as I'm concerned, there needs to be a dismantling of the DEI that is in practice right now, because it has become very performative. It has become very instant gratification, expectation driven, right? Down to, we would do workshops and they'd say, can I get my certificate? You've literally been here for 1 hour. to talk about race, right? Like, you want a certificate to be a good human? Yeah. And I don't mean to sound harsh, but it is the truth, right? And that is what we are trying to also share in this novel. There's a lot of truths in here. Makes me think about the Parent Diversity Committee.
Yeah, with those passages I recognize from schools where we had done our work. I told Catherine, and I hope that I shared this with you, I told her how I think this book is so brilliant because they've cloaked a lot of really important lessons in the guise of a beach read. So it's all in there. Janice had a question, and then I wanted to be cognizant of time.
Okay. In the back. Did you have a
question? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to know another process question. At this point, having gone through this process of writing this book, do you think you could write the opposite person's character?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, let me say this. What we haven't mentioned is that we would write our characters' dialogue in the others' chapters. Oh, yeah. Because we realized that was not working. And I remember when I was in journalism school, one of my professors, it was this huge discussion one day that got really heated, and my white male classmates were really mad, but my professor, who was a Black woman, was like, don't write in dialect, like this idea that you think you know how Black people are talking. And it was just this insane conversation. And I was like, yeah, I'm never doing that. And then I'm like, I can't write DeAndrea's dialogue at all. And then when I would have her voice in my chapters, I would make it like the Queen's English, and just totally. And so then, Christine would come in and fix it.
Same with Becky, though. I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could do it in the same way, which is why I was struggling, even though I had the idea for the book. I was struggling with that. Like, how do I tell this story in an honest and authentic way without letting Becky speak for herself, right? And so, to answer your question, that I knew I couldn't do it. But I will say I did try to write some of Becky's dialogue. It was equally as horrible. I do not speak white woman. Apparently. Thank you.
Janice?
Hi.
Hi.
Again, I'm Janice. This is part of my book club. And the name of our book club is It Is What It Is.
There's a new member waiting for you.
But now, of course, we live in Durham.
Driving 45 minutes.
I want to comment on the one section of the book, or the one when it sort of gets serious, and I was driving down the street. I was listening on Audible, and like sort of laughing along, and the satire of it all. And then all of a sudden, it just sort of got real. And I guess for those of you who haven't read the book, there's one sort of serious, more than one, but there was one particularly serious thing. And I was glad you put that in there because I was getting sort of caught up in the conversations. I'm laughing, and then when that happened, it really caused me to pause and just really reflect on what a real issue this is. And so I just want you all to comment on what made you stop and put that in. It really changed.
I'm wondering which scene.
Well, no spoilers.
I know, no spoilers.
Yeah,
The end.
like, yeah.
Oh,
The
at the end?
Closer to the end.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay,
when they're
yeah.
having that celebration.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now it's in everyone's interest. So
I know,
so
now
you haven't read it yet.
Get to the
no, that's a really good question. I mean, I and the reason I asked is because there are serious moments that are woven in to the book, right? And a large part of that is because, I mean, we are so many different things, right? Like, I am not just Black. I am a Black woman. I am a mother. I'm a friend. I'm a sister. I'm a daughter, right? And so we get to see these characters navigating all aspects of their life while not ignoring race, right? Which was, I love that. I love that quote. And so we had to weave in those serious moments. There are conversations about sleepovers. It's a very real thing. See, Black folks, we all the Black folks are like, white folks are like, sleepovers are great. That's But we're all, that is because we are all having memories of our own childhoods, and we're all nodding because if we are parents, we are also thinking of when we had to have that first sleepover conversation, right? And so we wove a lot of those just like pivotal moments, I would say, in interracial friendships and dynamics that can be challenging. And that one particular scene that you're talking about at the end it was hard. It was hard to write. There was a moment where I actually cried to Catherine because I just didn't want to write part of this scene at the end, right? I just didn't want to have to go there emotionally. And so, yeah, it's a beach. It looks like a beach read. But you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn some things. You want to add anything to that?
No, just that. Thanks for bringing that up, Janice, and that reflection about it, because that's what happens to us, right? We're like moving along and we're okay, and then bam, another thing happens. Like there will be another thing that happens. There always is, and so we live in that. We coexist in that. The finding the levity and the humor and finding connection, and then inevitably something serious happens again.
And I would like to say I really appreciated you including the experience of grief.
Oh yeah.
Grief, because that is we all have that experience, and grief comes to us all, and it does not care race, creed, age, it comes. And I really appreciated that particular experience being one of the common experiences that they're having somewhat independently. They don't even know.
Yeah.
And I found that quite poignant and beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to be cognizant of our time.
Yes, because we can talk all day.
So it's 5:07. Dawn, you look like you were going to have your hand just up a second. So if there's one, can we do one more? Just one more question? Okay. And then, amazing.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much for writing such a culturally timely, pop culture relevant book that also has so many, for the acquisition in the room, like some themes, some already I picked up on gender roles and male emotionality, when Malik was like, it's okay to cry, and I even think about, so this, this is my life in the last couple of years. Catherine knows very well. This is going to be a book that I can literally pass to the other moms of my daughter before they have the sleepover. And also, I started doing parent sleepovers too. Like, sure, your child can come to my house, and you come too, in case they start acting up.
Black people love having people come to their house. Hey, you ain't going over there.
No. But
it's an inside joke, yeah.
I'm interested in what other themes we can expect. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and my favorite one that I picked up just so far in what I've read is after leaving Alabama a couple years ago and coming when my daughter was 5 to Blacksburg, Virginia. So I don't want to hear anything, okay?
Okay, that sounds right. It sounds
right. I'm from New York, lived in this area for a while, was in Alabama during George Floyd, and then right after that, when my daughter was 5, we had to find a new kindergarten for her in Blacksburg, Virginia. And that was not easy, as you can imagine. But at that time in academia, a big topic as it related to race and racism was time poverty. And I just even hearing how the two of them started their days differently, like Deandra's rushing and like, you know, sometimes it feels, I don't know if anybody else can relate, Black women specifically, but we never have enough time to do all the things that the white moms have time to do. She's up at 6 a.m. like, oh, this coffee and watching the kids in the pool at 6 a.m. I don't understand. And so
just a meditation room.
Of course. So what other themes do we have to look forward to as we're reading?
Can I add one thing that I think is important before we go is that I really appreciated that there are other friends who are of other races.
Yeah.
Susan, I told you there's an Asian character, and and there's also, I think, isn't one of the friends Latina?
One of the preschool moms, and then there's Haritha, who's Indian.
That's right. So they share. It's not just as central, just black and white. Although I do think that particular experience in that particular relationship is central. But these other friends also really add color, real color. You know, I mean that book literally. To the themes.
I love
So there are other themes about experiences that are outside of both of their realm that I really appreciated the generosity of that. So that's one I wanted to add, and I wanted to make sure that you know that too.
Thanks for saying that. I would say another thing, and sometimes I read this passage, but these questions were so amazing that I didn't get to, which is good. Yeah, I know. Barb did say that. Like there's a line where Rebecca's arguing with her husband, and she's trying to explain to him white male privilege. And at one point he's like, they don't just give out houses to white men. And in her head she's like, but they kind of do, you know? But like, how do I explain that? And so housing actually is part of this. I mean, this is what I also like about our book, if I do say so, ourselves, is that there's like, you could just sort of stay on the surface, right? It's about friendship. It's about like, you know, these silly things that, you know, white ladies do and how it affects the Black women in the neighborhood and all that. And then you could go a little deeper, like there's another layer. Yeah. And at that layer, there's an invitation to think about stereotypes and microaggressions and objectification and tokenizing. And then there's another layer, and there's another invitation to say, okay, but does the existence of Rolling Hills, Virginia, is that antithetical to equity and justice and liberation? I mean, that's in here as well. And I think it kind of meets you where you are and where you want to go. And that's central to what we wanted to do with it. And then I think that is in there.
Yeah. One more thing I think is in there, sorry, Christine, is marital politics.
Oh, yeah.
And they share that within they do have good marriages, but they're real.
I mean, I made Malik more relatable.
I didn't know he leaves his dog on the floor.
You don't. But I love what you said about what other themes can you expect, because that was such a big part again of what we were trying to do is show the layered complexities of our lives, right? And for Black readers, it was very important that we see ourselves authentically represented on the page, which is speaking to the hurried franticness, the worry, right? Some of the things that she is worrying about when it comes to her 5-year-old daughter will sound literally unbelievable to someone who is Black that doesn't have a 5-year-old daughter in some of these particular circumstances and situations, right? And so I wanted us to really see ourselves. I am a mother. My daughter went to a school very similar to Magnolia Country Day School. It's a wonderful school for her. It was a challenge for me. You know what I mean? Oh, hey, you calling your teacher by her first name. What are you even talking about? You know, I know. And so much of it is, you know, this is also an intergenerational read. And so there's a lot of healing that I address through this book. Also, I snuck it in, right? But when we talk about the sleepovers, when we talk about what it feels like to be a Black woman or a Black man in some of these particular situations, allowing us to talk about it is part of the healing work, right? What I love so much about our conversation tonight, the laughter, the joy that we all had talking about very racialized specific instances and topics. And that is really what we want. We want to talk, right? Ask the neighbors, what is that in that pot? Because I see y'all walking around, everybody got one of these pots, and I just want to know what is in it. It looks fascinating, right? Like, no one is ever like, how dare you ask me what's in this pot, right? Like, you're walking around carrying the pot because it's something that you're proud of, and I want to know why, right? Talk to your neighbors. You know, I don't want to say they're all perfect. Of course, they're not all perfect, right? But we have to be willing to have conversations. And the reason I trusted Catherine with my Black History PowerPoint that I had to let go of, you know, Malik and so many other instances in this book is that she truly is a subject matter expert on courageous conversations and difficult dialogue. And so that is what this book is really opening the door for people to have those courageous conversations, to be inspired and encouraged, vulnerable to have difficult dialogue, to laugh about the sleepovers, the way that we were laughing about them, to ask questions. Because I know some of the white, I saw you over there, you're like, wow, all the girls so sad. You know what I mean? Like, we have to talk about it if we want to change, grow, heal, and do all these things that we say we want to do with DEI and anti-racism, and right?
Like, have real friendships.
True friendship. I don't want to call nobody out, but it's another Black and white friend group in here today.
That's my best friend.
I know.
I'll say too that, I mean, because the central to all of this is relationships. So I think when we do, I mean, even though, you know, thank you for calling attention to the conversations, the difficult dialogue, but I also think that because of the way that we've been talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, belonging, accessibility, right? You just add all these words to it that keep growing and growing, as if we can wordsmith our way out of racism. And we're so focused on that. But when we have these conversations, we tend to put rules on them. We say, oh, it's going to be a courageous conversation. And no shade to Glenn Singleton, because he does great work. I love the framework. Or it's going to be a difficult conversation. But when we start with that framework, then we already feel like it's going to be fraught, that we're nervous. And if we can do this and have this book to talk about. And so we do say, like, read the book in community. You know, a lot of you have brought people with you tonight. You've bought the books for others in your lives. And that's what we really want to happen is, like, yeah, read it, but then also invite others to read it with you and make meaning of it within your own communities together. And that's been the greatest gift, I think, of getting to do this with all of you tonight and with Christine overall.
Because if I told them that right out the gate that you were like subject matter expert and difficult, everybody would have been like, okay, let me write down my question first, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love, just take some of the edge off.
I know you'll join me in thanking Catherine and Christine. Town, come to Durham, come to Chapel Hill. I also have friends here that I love deeply. I have college friends, I've got neighbors, I've got girlfriends. I know women's friendships, we can run deep. We actually want to, but we have to have trust, and trust is earned. It's not given. So just remember that, go out, be trustworthy in your own relationships, and I wish you all the best friendships, full of love and joy.
Yes, thank you.